Senator, I have a copy of a letter I got from one of my colleagues dated May 18th. It is to the Assistant Secretary of State, Michael Posner, signed by you and Senator Kyle, your colleague, asking him for an apology on behalf of, I guess, Arizona. Why?
Apparently, Mr. Posner compared the immigration law in Arizona, which I'm sure he has not read, with the human rights abuses that have taken place in China. A regime that killed millions of its citizens, has detained without cause, abuses, oppresses the people of Tibet, the list goes on and on. Comparing the Arizona law to what takes place in China is an absolute outrage.
Well, as a follow-up to that, P.J. Crowley, who's the spokesperson for the State Department, said essentially that he backs up what Mr. Posner says, but then he says, Crowley, that he hasn't read the statute. Your thought about that?
I mean, you know, it's so disturbing to hear this portrayal by the liberal media and by people in the State Department of a bill that they haven't read. The Attorney General of the United States said that he hadn't read after he'd said he was considering bringing suit against the Arizona law. It's really remarkable. And the fact is, the Arizona law is a law that was bred by the frustration of the people of Arizona because the federal government would not enforce its responsibilities to secure the borders.
You mentioned
but just a second. I mean, to compare it with the human rights abuses that take place in China, for Mr. Crowley to make a comment about a law he hasn't read, I mean, it's so irresponsible and it's unfair, not only to the people of Arizona, but the people of this country to make comments about legislation that they don't even know what's contained in it.
I don't mean to be flip, sir, but I guess that in terms of this whole human rights discussion, it might be better to focus on Mexico, where there people have been beheaded. Last week, a police officer shot in broad daylight. They have now put 2 other police officers under house arrest with the thought that they are involved. The country is replete with corruption. What are we doing about Mexico?
Well, Mexico is in an existential struggle for its survival with the drug cartels. I admire President Calderon. If the wrong guy had won that election, and if the wrong guy wins the next election, then you're going to see a kind of a thing that took place in Colombia before President Uribe came to power, and that is they'll just turn a blind eye to the drug cartels. The corruption is rife, just as you said, and the problems are enormous, and the brutality is beyond description. You know, a wedding the other day, they took the groom, his brother, and a nephew out and killed them, right out of the wedding ceremony. I mean, the brutality is beyond belief. But the fact is that Calderon is trying hard, and we are working with the Mexican government, and they do have a legitimate point when he will say, when he's here in Washington, that we are creating the demand for these $65 billion a year, or whatever it is, drugs that are coming across the border. They have corruption, they have enormous difficulties. We should work closely with them and try to help them in this struggle against the drug cartels.
Well, then I guess the thought is, if it's as bleak as it is, you say, in Mexico, and I was actually down there with Secretary of State Clinton a while back, and everything we saw was horrendous, including a lot of the weapons that have been seized by the authorities there. Is that why isn't the federal government doing something to protect Arizona from having that violence, that horrible human rights violations in Mexico, export from that country and into our country?
They're not doing enough, and the fact is that way back in 2007, some of us saw this dramatic increase in violence and knew that it was going to spill across our border. And we're very fortunate, frankly, Greta, that there hasn't been more of it. And so if we don't secure our border, sooner or later, something really bad is going to happen. And it won't be maybe just come from Mexico. It could come from someplace else in the form of a terrorist act. Every government has a responsibility to its citizens to secure its borders. The people in the southern part of my state are living in some parts of it in circumstances we should ask no citizen to live under. They can't go to the bus stop, their homes are being invaded, their property is being violated, and the drug cartels are becoming better equipped, better armed, better orchestrated, and a greater challenge to our law enforcement people. And meanwhile, this administration refuses to send the Guard to the border, which is clearly needed.
And you've asked for it now twice. Yesterday in a letter with Senator Kyle, and about 2 weeks ago. Is that right? Something like that.
Yes.
All right.
And by the way, Senator Kyle and I have a 10-point plan that we are confident, and so are our other friends in enforcement, that would secure the border.
Now, had the election gone the other way, I'd be posing the same question to you, or asking, is it? But President Obama, when he ran for office for president, like you did, promised an immigration reform policy. Why do we get zippo? And he's not the first one to make that promise. Presidents before him have, but absolutely nothing, I mean, virtually nothing has been done.
Well, here's the problem, and I'll try to be brief. In the 1980s, under President Reagan, we gave amnesty to 2 million people who are in this country illegally and promised to secure the borders. We didn't secure the borders. In the 90s, we promised to secure the borders. We didn't. And now here we are in 2010 with many saying we got to have comprehensive immigration reform. We can't do that until we have this border secure. Otherwise, we're like a hamster on a wheel, because if once you address it in a comprehensive fashion, if millions more are coming in illegally, then you're going to have to start all over again. That's why the emphasis has to be on border security, then address the rest of the issue.
All right, why, if it's gone back to President Reagan and presidents on both sides of the aisle and senators on both sides of the aisle and congressmen on both sides of the aisle, why isn't that done? We hear that from everybody. If everyone says that should be done, why isn't it done?
I think a number of factors. One, not making use of the technology that's available and providing the manpower and completing the fence. Another is there are certain forces that say, you know, this is a good workforce supply and, you know, maybe we ought to let more people come in. But in the last couple of years of the Bush administration, they got serious about border security and we made significant progress. This administration is not serious.
Are you still in favor of path to citizenship?
Yes, and a legal temporary worker program that is much needed also, particularly in the agricultural sector. But first, we have to get the border secured.
Governor Brewer, how's she doing on this issue?
I'm very proud of the work she's doing, and I'm glad she highlighted the fact that the president would make a joke out of the problems on our border and the laws that our legislature passed. And again, you can't make it up when the Attorney General of the United States says that he's going to consider going to court and then testifies before Congress that he hasn't read the bill.
What do you think do they not understand the sort of, I mean, it seems to me the people of Arizona are sort of begging for it. I mean, I read the statute, and I think it's an effort to run immigration policy, which the state is not supposed to do under the Constitution. But I see it as a cry for help from Arizona. Why are you ignored, your state, or aren't you ignored?
Well, I just think it's exactly as you said. It's a reaction to the federal government to exercise its responsibility to secure the border. And by the way, our governor will point out the costs are horrendous of illegal immigration into our state, both in law enforcement, health care, so many other ways. And do not underestimate the sophistication of the human smugglers and the drug cartels. They work together. The human rights, you hear a lot about human rights in this debate. We don't hear much about the fact, the abuse of these people that these coyotes are bringing across, holding them for ransom, jamming them into panel trucks, mistreating them in the worst possible way. You would think that human rights advocates would say, let's secure the border so that over time we can bring people into our country in an orderly fashion and not be subject to these abuses. And the drug cartels are right along with them.
All right, what about businesses who hire people who are not documented? What do we do about that?
Once we secure the borders, we should prosecute employers to the fullest extent of the law that hire someone who's in this country illegally.
Why do we have to wait to secure the borders? Why can't we do those two things at the same time?
Well, I think you could do some of that, but the fact is if you have an unending stream of people into the country, then it obviously is addressing the symptom, not the problem.
Yeah, except for the fact that you don't have to hire, I assume you don't have to hire someone who's undocumented, if that's against the law. I mean, maybe the law should be changed, I don't know, but right now that's against the law.
Yes, it is.
So what about going after the companies?
I think we should do that. but I think we should get the border secure, and so that there is not this symptom, which is people who are coming to this country and working illegally.
All right, so what happens, can you pick up the phone and call the White House or call the president and say, look, this is a real problem to my state? Can you do that?
Well, we've written and we've communicated with people.
Do you get responses?
No, we don't.
None?
Well, we sent a letter April 9th to Secretary Napolitano yesterday requesting National Guard on the border. Yesterday at a hearing I asked her about it, and that was April 9th. She said they're still looking at the request. Meanwhile, our wildlife refuges are being destroyed, people are coming across, and the drugs are coming across.
And you're getting boycotts because there's no progress in trying to solve the problems. And cities are boycotting your state.
Yeah, let me just give you two numbers real quick. Over 1.3 million pounds of marijuana were intercepted last year just in the Tucson sector of our border. Over 1.3 million pounds. They weren't prosecuting anybody that they apprehended with less than 500 pounds of marijuana. The other is 241,000 people crossed the Tucson sector illegally last year. And if you figure you catch 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 5, roughly 1 million people crossed the Tucson border into Arizona last year with rings that take them up to Tucson, up to Phoenix, and then distribute them all over the country. This is a crime syndicate. This is mafia at its worst. It is not just some poor person that wants to come across our border. It's drug cartels and human smuggling and human rights abuses to a degree that is appalling.
I don't think a lot of people realize what's going on in Mexico, and I guess that's sort of why my attention is so focused on it, because it's just right over the border, and the level of violence down there is unthinkable.
Well, part of it is between the drug cartels themselves as they fight over these lucrative routes. Part of it, of course, is the government trying to crack down on these cartels. And look, I love the Mexicans. I respect President Calderon, but the truth is the only institution that can really be trusted is the Army, because the police and border and others, Border Patrol and others, have been corrupted by these billions and billions of dollars that are made. So I respect them. We have done a lot of work with the Mexican government trying to help them bring this under control, but honestly, they're fighting an uphill battle.
Explain to me, no matter what the topic is in Washington, when I meet with senators, members of Congress, I say, we wrote a letter to the White House. And I don't know if it's probably true of the last administration too, but where do these letters go? Because I never hear anyone getting any responses back. I mean, how do we actually get action?
The only way I think we're going to really get action on the border is the American people being listened to. 70% of the people in Arizona supported the law we passed. 60% of them and more of the American people support it. And they know that in Arizona we need a secure border. And so maybe public opinion will have an effect. And again, people say you can't support the border, secure the border. You can secure the border. John Kyle and I have a 10-point plan to secure the border. It takes people, it takes fences, and it takes technological surveillance, which we can do.
Senator, thanks, sir.
Thank you.